Live.
Am I live? Mostly. Okay, you just go. Okay. All right. Sorry, but technical difficulties here. So I'm going to tell you why I love slow Java. If you have any questions, I can take them later because I don't want to cut into Trisha's time. It's all right if I take 30, 45 minutes of your time, right? Okay, no problem. All right, sounds good. So my name is Pratik Patel. I work at Azul Systems. We're sponsoring the food. And I think Michael, our sales rep, said he'll buy everyone gallons of beer afterwards. Is that right, Michael? I hear a yes there. So Frank will tell you where we're going to go afterwards to grab a beverage or two. But I'm also a Java champion. I also help run the Atlanta Java User Group, and with Vincent help put on, and the rest of our team put on DevNexus. So you should check that out. So anyway, slow Java. Does anyone know what this TV show is? Never seen it? Okay. So Silicon Valley, that's right. So when this TV show came out, it came out in what, 2011 or 2012 or something, right? I was working at a startup, and I kid you not, I had to stop watching this TV show because it was way too close to reality. That episode where they bring in a consultant that charges $20,000 a day, that was us for a few days. So what's that? The Carver. Yes, the Carver, yes. So, anyways, and so after working in a startup, it's like, I should take it easy, right? Maybe like when I do development, I'd like to have slow Java because I like to be able to take 10 or 15 minutes to go, and while my app is starting, to go get a cup of coffee, or maybe take a nap, or maybe just go look at the pool. Well, this pool is empty, but you get the idea, right? So, but if you don't like slow Java, sometimes I'm also in a hurry, right? Maybe I need to get some shit done. I got a deadline, whatever it is. So what I want to talk to you about is something called CRaC, or CRaC, which stands for Coordinated Restore at Checkpoint. Now, who's heard of this technology so far? Okay, so about, what's that? Oh, you're on CRaC right now? Okay, excellent. So about half the folks have heard of it. So half of the folks that haven't, you can just take a break. But what I want to do is talk about this for a few minutes and let you know what it is and some of the challenges around it, how it compares to a couple of other things, okay? So when we think of JVM performance, so the company I work at, Azul Systems, we make what we consider to be the fastest Java virtual machine available out there, right? But when we think about speed and performance, there's a number of different things that I like to think about as a software developer. Number one, how long does it take for an app to start, right? Whether it's a Spring Boot or legacy J2EE app. Is anyone running Quarkus in here, out of curiosity? Anyone? Okay, does anyone know what Quarkus is? Okay, that's good. How many people are actually running it in production? 0, okay. How many people are still running Java EE? Okay, all right, so for the other people who are running it, then raise your hand. The Java EE support group meets at the bar right after this meetup, okay? So you can come and join us and, figure out what life choices led you to that point even today. Anyways, the other things that I think about in terms of performance is how fast does the JVM run at start time? This includes things like the JIT compiler, garbage collector. Rarely is it that I've written bad code, because just like you folks out there, I don't write slow code. I only write optimally, handcrafted, organic, farm fresh, super fast code, right? But it's the JVM that slows me down. So what can we do about this? So let's focus on CRaC for just a minute, right? I don't have enough time to get into all that stuff. Maybe Frank will invite me to talk about performance sometime later this year. But let's talk about the startup problem, the first bullet that we were looking at here, okay? So there are a number of different things that are out there today that will help you get faster startup for your application. So let me just take a quick survey. For folks, everyone in here is a Java developer and you're building a Java app. How many people's Java app takes more than 10 minutes to start up? There's got to be, 28 minutes? What kind of app is it? It's a game. Okay, that's fair enough. Anybody else still running like some old application that takes forever to start up? So I was working with a customer recently. They were running, and don't laugh, they were running a very old version of Java, Java 6, running Apache AOJ. Does anybody remember what that is? Yeah, that's old school. Guess what else they were running? Struts. Yeah. And their app took about 30 minutes to start up. And the sales engineer called me up and said, this is driving me insane. How can I speed this up? And with one simple hack, I made it start up for 30 minutes to less than 10 minutes. Does anyone want to guess what that hack was? It wasn't CRaC. Anyone want to take? What's that? Nope, not CDS. That's a good, Chandra, that's a good answer. That's not it though. The answer is surprisingly simple. No, it's even more simple than that. All I did was went in, and they were using Spring Framework too. All I did was go in and set the Spring Framework initialization logging to be at error instead of info level. So there you go, right? Sometimes the old tricks are the best tricks, okay? Anyways, so we have all this new technology that we can use. Most of you are probably familiar with ahead of time, or AOT, which is in GraalVM. There's something that's been around for a little while at the Linux kernel layer called CRIU. And what I'm going to talk about very quickly is CRaC, or checkpoint and restore coordination. Okay, so it is. Oh, okay, that's fine. We can work in the dark. Okay, so it is coordinated. So unlike some other solutions out there, you do have to change a bit of code. We'll talk about that very quickly, but it does come with an API. And what you do is you don't necessarily have to do this as a end developer, but people who write the Spring Framework or other frameworks, or if you write a JDBC driver, you have to have your code such that it uses the API for CRaC, okay? So you do have to do a little bit of stuff for it, but it gives you the ability to take a checkpoint and tend to bring up your application at that point in time when that checkpoint was taken. So you skip all the initialization. And what a lot of people don't realize is that with CRaC, you also get a warmed up JIT compiler. So you're not always having that long warm-up period in the C2 phase of your JIT compilation. The checkpoint you take includes the warmed up JIT metadata, so you get to instantaneously fast speed as well as fast startup. Okay, so CRaC is something that was actually led by my company, Azul. One of our engineers came up with this idea and built it on top of CRIU, which is that low-level kernel technology in Linux that allows you to take a checkpoint at the operating system level. Okay, and what you do is you basically take a checkpoint and you fire it up, and you add these flags for taking a checkpoint. You issue a command, and then when you want to restore from that checkpoint, you pass this flag and you say this is where the CRaC files are located, and it will just go and load that and get your app running. Okay, so it does require some code changes if you're doing low level stuff, i.e. if you're managing network sockets yourself, for example, database connections, file interfaces, etc. You do have to go and restore those. But again, if you're not a framework developer or you don't work that low level, you generally don't have to worry about this. Okay, and again, it allows you to close and restore resources so that you can get back up. Okay, and this is a lightning talk, so I'm not going to ramble on forever. But these are some of the numbers with and without CRaC on OpenJDK. So you can see a Spring Boot app that would normally take 4 seconds will start in about 40 milliseconds, which is pretty good, right? Again, there's Quarkus and Micronaut. Does anyone use Micronaut out of curiosity? Anybody? Well, okay, does anybody use Spring Framework in here? Okay, it was pretty much everybody. I was just making sure that I'm at the right meetup group. So anyways, so again, that's the lightning talk on CRaC. Just want to give you an idea of what it was. There's a bunch of documentation out there, but to be honest with you, CRaC is still very much in the beta phase. We expect at Azul that there should be a release that has a production-ish ready version of CRaC that will work across Spring and other things, maybe by the middle of this year or in the third quarter of this year. So it is kind of new technology, but if you're running into microservices or in serverless environments, then obviously it's something that you'll be interested in. Yeah, was there a quick question? Yes, so yes, CRaC is based on CRIU, which is only runs on Linux, and hold on, it only runs on x86 architecture Linux right now. Okay, so if you're running, for example, on Graviton on AWS, that won't work yet. It will eventually. How many people are using are you using Graviton, ARM64 or anything? Okay. Oh, you guys are using. Oh, you have a question or? Oh, you're running Graviton? Oh, okay. Okay, Graviton 2 and 3. All right, interesting. I didn't know how many Java people were running Graviton yet. But anyways, it is going to come out later this year, and it will require some framework support. You can go and play around with it now, but don't do what I did, which is spend the last 2 nights trying to get your demo working on an M1 Mac, because an M1 Mac is ARM64 and not x86. And even in QEMU emulation mode, it still doesn't work because it has to have basically CPU level support for it to work properly. Anyways, so check out our Azul JVMs. You can actually download a Azul JVM. Our free version is called Zulu. It has support for CRaC. We have CRaC support for JDK11 and JDK17 also. So you can actually play around with this stuff. And if you have an M1 Mac like I do, then you can fire up your rack of servers that you have in your basement. Everyone has a rack of servers in their basement, right? Yeah, okay. Or you can just provision a cloud instance to try this out, okay? And of course, as I said before, our company focuses very heavily on making the best Java virtual machines. We have what we feel is the fastest JVM. So for example, if you're running Apache Kafka, all you have to do is switch out the JVM from OpenJDK to our high performance JVM, which is called Azul Prime, and you get 40% speed increase out of the box without making any other changes. And that's not us saying it, that's our customers who say that. Okay. Anyways, I'm going to shut up now and we'll get on with the AMA. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Great.
Great, yes. Nice. And this, and this. Oh my God. I haven't done public speaking for like 3 years and I can't remember how to do it at all. Like, hi, I'm Trisha. Thank you. Oh my God, there's so many books.
They're all going to sit here and watch you talk.
Books for everybody. Nice.
Now no one's leaving early because your chances of winning a book here are super high.
Nice. Great. So now's a good time to pimp my books. Right. So yes, I'm Trisha. I'm a Java champion. I used to work for JetBrains for like a really long time. And then last year, because I decided I wanted to write some books, I decided to stop working for JetBrains because it is impossible to have 2 children, a full-time job, and write books. Like that's just the way it works. So in 2020, I did 97 things every Java programmer should know. Along with Kevlin Henney and with contributions from Jean, which is lovely. And then early last year, I helped finish off Head First Java, third edition, which is quite cool because basically Bert and Kathy did all the work and I just did some updates to it and I get to put my name on the front of the book. There's loads of these copies of this book. So I know that you all already know Java, so you probably think I don't care about Head First Java, but I did update the concurrency chapters at the end of the book. And so there's a bunch of more modern concurrency in there. And I can tell you that there's not a lot of examples about modern concurrency because when I did my research, there's like no examples of how to do stuff like this. So the modern concurrency stuff is quite cool. And there's some updated IO and things like that. Some of these questions are about how to learn to pass tech interviews. And this is a great book to learn how to pass tech interviews. And then the other thing that I've been working on for the last couple of years is getting to know IntelliJ IDEA because I already knew IntelliJ IDEA really well when I first started working for JetBrains. And then I worked for them for 7 years and got to know features really, really well. And it wasn't satisfying enough for me to do like 5-minute videos on stuff. I really wanted to like get a lot of the stuff from my head and put it into a book so that people could sort of see the whole story of like how the IDE thinks and like where to get started and like where to look basically when you want to do particular things. And it's split into 4 sections. So it should address questions from new users and from long-term users as well. So that's kind of the goal of this book. So thank you for letting me pimp my books. I'm going to go. Not really. Should I start with the questions that were pre-submitted or? Okay. I'm going to answer the first question because it was the best question. Thank you very much. Which of your books did you find the easiest, hardest to write, and why? I don't really know. Do you want me to answer the hardest or the easiest? Because they're all hard. Writing a book is really hard. I've been wanting to do it for ages, and it turns out it's really difficult to do. 97 Things, I was just an editor. So I have 3 pieces in here that I wrote, and the rest of it was just reading other people's submissions and deciding what was good and what should go in and how to tell the story. And that involved a lot of thinking, really, about we wanted to put things like contradictory things in there because, you know, our industry is full of conflicting advice. And so we wanted to put a lot of balance in here. Like if someone says one thing, we want an article which said the other thing. And sometimes that meant going out and finding someone that had the opposite opinion. So that was interesting. Head First Java was difficult, easy because most of it was already written, and difficult because most of it was already written. And, you know, I need to fit in with someone else's writing style. And, you know, it's a really well-loved, well-known book, and I don't want to mess that up. You know, I don't want to change anything too much. And obviously everything I do has to be kind of aligned with what Bert and Kathy had in mind for that book. So that's a lot of, like, you don't have a lot of freedom necessarily to do the things that you want to do. And then my book, which I wrote with Helen Scott, who's my friend and co-worker at JetBrains, was easier because it was just what we wanted to write, but harder because we self-published, and not necessarily highly recommended because self-publishing is like doing all the screenshots and resizing everything. And for the physical book, I had to go through every single page and find out where to put the stupid page breaks, which if you use O'Reilly, they do that for you. So not recommended. So they're all hard to write. Don't write a book. Shall we take a question from the room if you've got any questions? No question. Yes.
What was the time frame for your recent book?
Okay, so getting to know IntelliJ IDEA took 2 years. And this is all stuff that I already knew, and I'd already written a bunch of it, and Helen had written a bunch of it. And we started it in June 2020, and we thought we'd get it done by the end of the year. And it took 2 years. So that took 2 years. Head First Java was, I mean, I started talking to Bert about helping him out with that in 2011. But the actual writing bit, from my point of view, I came on board in September and was done by February. But again, most of it was already written. So these things just take freaking ages. Yes.
Yeah, while we're talking about writing, did you have any problem getting bored with writing about one feature after another in an IDE?
Yeah.
So you gotta repeat the question. Okay?
Yes. Did I find myself getting bored writing about the same thing, whether it's the same with this one feature after another, or maybe even just stuff in Java, for example? Not so much. With getting to know IntelliJ IDEA, there was always a lot of work to do. So if I got bored in one particular area, I would skip to another. It drove my co-author crazy because she's like, are you not doing it in a linear fashion? I'm like, no, I'm so bored of that. I'm going to something completely different. So I would use that to hop around. With Head First Java, that was like, that's very storytelling. So you kind of have to start here and work until the story's done. I'll tell you what is very, very boring about writing a book. And that is when you think you've finished, then you have to read it like 4 more times afterwards. And that is extremely tedious. More questions? All right, I'm going to start on some Java questions, I think. I don't know if the people who asked the questions are here. Here's a controversial question. Do you think Oracle is a good custodian of Java? Well, I'm on video, so Oracle is great, and you should definitely pay them money. Oracle does a decent job. They are trying their best. They did try to offer me a job, so I've got to say really nice things about them. No, I think that Oracle has been trying to balance. It's an interesting company because obviously they have to make money. They're very interested in making money. And for a long time, it was difficult for them to sort of see where Java makes money. And they didn't really understand how, to begin with, how community kind of is important, especially with something like Java and open source. But I think over, like, how long have they been in charge of Java now? Like 15 years, maybe? I think they're kind of just about getting the hang of it. I don't know. Yeah, I think they'll do for now, I think. I don't want to say much more on video. Please don't take away my Oracle Java champion status. Java is over 25 years old. Is it still useful to learn for new developers? I mean, obviously, I think yes. Obviously, and I think most people in this room would agree with that. But the reason why I think it is important is, so I've always been quite career and money minded. And so for me, it's always been important that when I'm thinking about my career and what I want to do, like that I have a career and I have jobs to move into. And I think the thing about Java is that, even taking aside the fact that it's evolving quite a lot at the moment, and I think there's a lot of interesting things happening in the Java world. Let's assume it's sort of still stagnated the way it was between sort of 7 and 8. Java is still important to learn because there's just so much stuff written in Java, and there will continue to be a lot of stuff written in Java for a long time. I mean, you can joke about Java's the new COBOL or whatever, but I mean, you're here in New York City, you know, loads of financial institutions are using Java. The same in London. There's like gaming backends and just millions of stuff out there. So it's useful to learn, even if you think it's boring to maintain legacy systems, because there's jobs and money in it. But on top of that, with the new release cadence, which is not new anymore, it's been out for ages, the 6 monthly releases, with the evolution of Java taking away the boilerplate, although I kind of object to the term boilerplate, with the way that the Java's kind of evolving to meet new needs, the fact that it's not all just run by Oracle, for example, Azul and other companies are doing their bit to kind of like evolve the language and the JVM to be useful for everyone. Like, I really don't understand this question of, oh, Java is dead and is it relevant anymore? I just think that it's going to continue to be relevant because there's a lot of stuff already written in it, and there's a lot of new things coming, and it will continue to evolve to meet the needs of organizations and developers, in my opinion. Yes.
So there's a lot of talk about how Go much replace Java. How do you feel about that?
I just think that there's so much need for technology in the whole world. There's so many organizations writing applications. There's, you know, code is used everywhere. There's space for all of that stuff. You could have Rust and Go and all these other languages expand and explode into a huge space, and there'd still be plenty of space for Java as well. Like the space is just so big. I can't see any one language squeezing out even any other language, because there's just, it's not a zero-sum game. There's plenty of space for all of us. Yes.
What can we do to make Java more accessible to newbies?
Right. Oh, I like that question.
Please.
What can we do to make Java more accessible for newbies? I know that there is, so you have to bear in mind that I was on sabbatical for the last year, so I'm a little bit behind on news, but there is a movement inside sort of from the Java language architects to make Java easier to learn. For example, getting rid of a lot of trying to see if we can get rid of the boilerplate for things like public static void main and system.out.println, things like JShell, which came along to help us kind of run stuff in a kind of scripting kind of way. The fact that you have to write a whole lot of code to print out something from a simple class is a bit of a barrier to newbies, because you don't just write print hello world or whatever. So there is some work going on in that area. I think also something which is missing a bit in the Java world is, when I started to learn Java a long time ago, we had, I want to say it was developers.java.com, something like that, which was run by Sun. And there was a lot of like Sun run developer resources and central places to learn from tutorials. And at the moment, the Java community, for better or for worse, is kind of spread now over a lot of different places. And there's not like one central place you go to learn Java. In fact, I get a lot of my friends, most of my friends are techies of some kind, not always Java people. And the non-Java people say, where do I go to learn Java? And I'm like, I don't really have an answer to that question, because there isn't like helloworld.java.com to go to. So I think we need, there's at least two different approaches. One is around the education piece. There needs to be a central place for us to be able to teach people how to do stuff, including perhaps having like the online REPL and things like that. And two, maybe removing some of the ceremony around the language itself to make it just a little bit easier to get started with, so that you don't have to ignore like 6 lines of code that you don't understand in order to get started with programming in Java. Yes.
The first one is, I remember it seemed a while ago about burnout. Hope you were doing better now. Any suggestions on how to manage it?
Right. So the question is, I remember you said something about burnout. I hope you're doing fine. And how did you, tips for managing it? Something like that. Thank you for the good wishes. I don't know if I'm doing fine, but I needed money, so I need to get back to work. No, I think taking a break is important and really difficult, because I took a break and I wrote 2 books, so that was a bit stupid. Again, not recommended. And I think the thing about burnout is, I mean, it can be caused by a lot of different things, but a lot of it is about you putting pressure on yourself to deliver stuff like constantly. And you have to sort of, I'm not very good at this. You have to sort of step back from that and go, what am I doing and why am I doing it? You know, you get on this sort of treadmill of constantly doing stuff. And I think the pandemic kind of made that worse as well. Before the pandemic, for example, I would go to a lot of events and speak to a lot of people and get feedback that way. And I've been working remotely for 10 years. But once the events thing was kind of taken away and a lot of what I did was just remote, I just kind of got into this loop of just producing and producing and producing and producing. And you don't get any feedback on whether you're doing a good job or if you're doing the right thing, and you just end up like just spinning. So I think one of the tips is just make sure you speak to people and make sure that you get feedback on your work and on your mental health. I don't really have an answer to that. You sort of need to take a break.
What's your favorite programming language that's not Java?
What's your favorite programming language that's not Java or Kotlin? Was that? Well, it's good because I haven't learned Kotlin yet. Don't tell anyone. Oh God, I'm going to say something really controversial. I'm going to say JavaScript. But that's only because I've been doing Java for so long that the only other language I've done for like 20 years is JavaScript. So, although I did do a little bit of Go, and I did quite like Go. Yeah. Oh, can I say Groovy?
Yay!
Right. I'll say Groovy. I like Groovy. I mean, I don't know if JVM languages count or not, but like I like Groovy. I like writing my tests in Groovy because they're very descriptive, and Spock is like my favoriteest testing framework of all time.
Ruby's fine. It's very prescriptive that it not be Java or Kotlin.
Right. Then I will take Groovy.
And you don't need to write the power static point and Groovy.
Exactly.
And start Groovy and that one.
Exactly. Groovy, you just write what you mean and away you go. And then of course it fails at runtime and you absolutely hate it. Yes, you had a question before. Right. What suggestions do I have for people working with features of IntelliJ that are poorly documented? Don't talk to me about it anymore. I don't work there anymore. No, that's a really good question. Can I ask which features? Yes. Oh. Yeah, structural search and replace is a good example. And that, you know why it's my favorite example? I did do a short video on structural search and replace because I love it as a feature, because you can use regular expressions, you can search across your code base. I used it, for example, I used it in my demo in New York a while ago to replace old style log statements with one that takes a Lambda expression, for example. No, it is poorly documented. No, sorry, it's not poorly documented. It's documented from a reference documentation point of view, not from a user use case point of view, which is the same thing as not great documentation. No, I did do a video on that to try and plug that hole, but in theory, you should be able to use the UTrack issue tracker from JetBrains to raise even documentation requests. They do get triaged pretty quickly. The only thing is that, like a lot of organizations, that kind of thing falls into a hole because it's not really the technical writers, it's kind of developer advocacy, but developer advocates don't necessarily have the same, don't have a set of features they have to document or cover, and so sometimes these things get missed. But for IntelliJ, I would raise it in the UTrack. So it's I want to say I idea.utrack.com, probably, or it'll be something else. Yes. If you just search for UTrack IntelliJ, it's there. Yes.
I was joking about ChatGPT earlier.
Right.
But what do you think the impact is of ChatGPT? And I'm sure there's going to be other AI tools going to be announced because of ChatGPT. How does that affect our industry? How does it affect all of us?
I don't know the answer to that question.
And the question is?
Oh, right. How does ChatGPT affect us as developers or the industry as a whole?
Because I had it write the invite. This video did a pretty good job.
Right. I think that, so here's my top tip for staying ahead of the curve technically. My top tip is keep your ear to the ground and figure out like what's coming, what's big, and what's, what do you need to learn and what don't you need to learn. For me, ChatGPT is in that region of, oh, this is interesting, lots of people are talking about it. I don't need to know it right now, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time researching it, but it's on my list of things to keep an eye on, because there's a lot of potential there. It's quite interesting. So for me, I can see it going one of two ways. Either it does become like so important to our industry that we all have to learn about it and figure out how to work with it, or it's a blip and then nobody cares about it and we don't have to care about it anymore. So I think at the moment we're in the sort of hype phase, and I think it's worth being aware of it and keeping abreast of what's happening there. But I don't know, I can't really make any calls on that. Right, let me answer some more questions from here. Some of them are quite long. Oh, I like this one. What do you think is the worst feature of Java? I'm just going to answer what Brian Getz says, which is serialization, because this is where a lot of the security problems creep in. And also because I don't really have an opinion apart from that. This question, I don't know if I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name right. Is it Guarev? I don't know if he's here. I shouldn't say he. The question is, what's the career pathway for a 10+ year person who wants to be in the coding domain / space? I'm not really sure if that question is, it says 10+ year person who wants to be in the coding domain. So I'm not really sure if that's someone who wants to stay techie or someone who wants to like move into tech from somewhere else. Which one should I answer? I could just answer whichever question I want. If the answer is you've got 10 years experience and you want to stay coding, what do you do? If that's the question, my answer is oversimplifying the case is just keep coding. Don't take the suggestions to move into purely managerial positions. Don't get switched. This applies a little bit more to women in technology. Don't get switched into business analysis roles or project management type roles. Like if you want to keep coding, just keep that in mind when you're looking at promotions or sideways moves or new jobs, because it is tempting, even in this day and age, to think that once you've got 10 years of coding under your belt, that the only way to get more money and more prestige is to become a manager and a pure manager. And that's not necessarily the case, especially in a city like New York City. I mean, you've got loads of developer positions which require 10, 15, 20 years experience as a coder. So the simple answer is just keep coding, really, and don't let them move you into something else. If your organization requires you to have management in order to take the next step up or get more money, then the answer is to look somewhere else where 10 years experience is required as a developer. And that's kind of what I've done with my career. Like, I mean, I'm a developer advocate now, but I'm still basically a coder, and that's what I've been doing for 20 years. Another question.
Yeah, can you tell us about being a developer advocate?
Okay.
What does that involve? Month to month, day to day,
Oh
week to
God.
week?
What does it mean to be a developer advocate? For me, the thing I love about being a developer advocate, which is not the question you asked, but I'm going to answer it anyway, is that I get to do code. I get to write code. I get to think about like how I do a lot of demo code and things to kind of demonstrate particular things, but I also get to do the other stuff which I really like, which is like talking to people and writing and to some lesser extent doing videos. I mean, I like doing the videos because it's a really good way to demonstrate stuff, like because when you write things down, you have to take a bunch of screenshots to show like how things work. And with a video, you can just be like, do this and go here and ta-da, it works. I'm not a big fan of doing the video editing, which is another part of what I used to do at JetBrains. So yeah, as a developer advocate, do a bunch of loads of different stuff, writing blog posts, doing videos, going to conferences, going to meetups, writing code, because whether you're doing something for IntelliJ IDEA or MongoDB, when I used to work at MongoDB, you've got to have code to show developers. And especially if you want to be a developer advocate, you have to sort of continually prove to the developers that you are a coder. Otherwise, you're just a marketing person and it's not the same thing. Does that answer your question?
I guess I have a follow-up question,
Okay.
which is, the code that you write, does it go into production?
Right. Does the code that I write go into production? No, thank God for that. I have like, I saw today on my GitHub repository, I've got like 85 repositories, but they're all just like demo pieces, bits and pieces. Well, actually, the book was in GitHub as well. So I've got loads of like, and my blog is in GitHub as well. That might change with my new role at Gradle, because I think there might be some more opportunities to do some coding and like real code there. I don't know, because I've only been there since Monday and I'm not quite sure what I'm doing yet. Yes.
As a woman engineer in technology, do you think the industry has improved over the years in terms of diversity and inclusion?
As a woman in technology, do I think that the industry has improved in terms of diversity and inclusion? No, I know. I did look around this room and I did notice a distinct lack of women here. But at least we're not all white, so that's great. I'd like to say things have improved. I think there's a lot more awareness than there used to be. But improvement in terms of numbers, well, I don't know. It's a bit difficult because the last 3 years haven't existed, right? So the last 3 years is a different ball game. But my experience going to conferences over 7 years, I didn't see significantly more women attendees or significantly more women speakers. You might have a viewpoint on this.
Yeah, just going to say that fortunately in the Java space, diversity is not improved much, as a little bit. But if you go to a web conference,
Right.
it's a totally different ballgame. So it's almost approaching 50-50.
Right. So the comment there was that Java hasn't really moved the needle much, but other parts of the technology, like web and front end and stuff has. Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah. Yes.
Do you have thoughts on what can be done about it?
Yes. Okay, I mean, it's complicated, but the thing that I have most control over myself personally is that as a woman in technology who gives a shit about it being welcoming for women in technology, is I have to stand up here and be a woman in technology. I have to be a role model. I have to be visible, and because that's one thing. It's like women, if they don't see themselves in the room, they don't feel included. It's about inclusion more than anything else. And I have found the Java community extremely welcoming. I have found it, you know, I haven't really felt anything obvious against me for my gender. But if you walk into a room full of men and you're the only woman, especially if you're younger, it's intimidating, it's difficult. So, you know, you have to have people there to help bring the other people in. That's the short version, but it's very complicated. Which is not to say we shouldn't do anything about it. It's just there's lots of different factors. But for me, the most important thing is just give visibility. I love the video of DevNexus, by the way. I thought it was really good. You had a great, a lot of diversity there in that video, and I thought that's exactly the sort of thing that we need to be doing, just showcasing that these conferences are for everybody, and that's a good start. There was another question over there. Yes.
Yes, code. That having has made JetBrains fat and lazy.
Right. Have I used VS Code? Is JetBrains fat and lazy? I have not used VS Code primarily because, well, I was going to say because I worked for JetBrains, but no, it's just because I really, 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 really like IntelliJ IDEA. Like I'm even writing a novel in IntelliJ IDEA. Like, that's how much I like it. So no, I have not used VS Code. I might have to at some point, but I haven't installed it on my computer. Having defeated Eclipse, has that made JetBrains lazy? JetBrains is an interesting, I can't really comment. I haven't worked for them for a year or so. JetBrains has an interesting position in that, yes, in terms of IntelliJ IDEA and the Java IDE space, IntelliJ has definitely won that battle in the Java IDE space. The other JetBrains IDEs, such as WebStorm, etc., have more competition from, for example, VS Code. And it's a little bit more difficult because the superpower of JetBrains with IntelliJ IDEA is that they really do dog food it. They write IntelliJ IDEA in IntelliJ IDEA. So if you're a Kotlin developer or a Java developer, the IDE is there designed to support you because the people who wrote it were writing Java and Kotlin. And I'm not sure if the lack of dog fooding in the other languages makes a difference or not. I don't really know. Yes.
So say, ask how many people use IntelliJ versus VS Code.
Here. Okay, yes, who's using IntelliJ IDEA? Yeah, you all win a prize. Who's using Eclipse? You can have this book. Who's using VS Code? But you are using IntelliJ IDEA as well, right? Who's only using VS Code? And you can leave. No, it's fine. Okay, that's interesting. Is it for Java or for other languages? Okay.
So that was my entry point. This started, I mean, I also did JavaScript before, but more and more it's just constant. All you do is you have that com change to dev and
yeah, I mean, to try and paraphrase it a little bit for the live stream is that VS Code does have different use cases. For example, if you want to do certain types of collaborative development or cloud-based stuff I haven't done before, cloud-based type development and stuff like that. So yeah, and so it does fill a niche that IntelliJ IDEA specifically does not fulfill, which I'm allowed to say now. I don't work for JetBrains. Yes.
Both because it's the default in the documentation they're given for audit, and also because the machines they use are CRaC.
Yeah. Yes, high schools and universities use the tools that they have available to them based on the hardware and based on the knowledge of the faculty, etc. Which it comes back full circle to that question of how can we get more people into Java, and how can we get more people using IntelliJ IDEA. You need to educate the educators. So that they understand what's available and why it's helpful. How much time do we have? Okay, it's loads of time. Okay, I like this question as well. Actually, this is one for Eugene, I think. Does any kind of mandatory certification requirements, are there any mandatory certification requirements which can help in upskilling one's coding habits? Can I answer no? You shouldn't have certifications. I'm going to paraphrase that to, can certifications help you upskill? And the answer is yes. But my answer for these things is always it depends. Like it depends on which. It depends, first and foremost, it depends on you. Like, how do you learn? What's helpful for you? Because a lot of people don't like exams and it freaks them out. And having sort of like really structured certification stuff just really puts them off. So if that's you, certification is not for you. But for someone like me, I love exams. I love to get things right. I love my little gold star. Certification is great. And I have a little certificate which says I did it. I proved that I know Java. And then it comes down to your employer as well, because some employers do like to have a certification, especially if you're junior. So I think my advice to a lot of juniors is like, it's a bit like Pokemon. Get as much as you can in terms of experience or things you could put on your resume to make sure that you can get your foot in the door of whoever it is you're applying to. And certification can be one of those things. But if you absolutely hate it, don't do it. because there's a lot of employers who don't like it. Actually, they think that it's a specific skill which is not necessarily related to the skills you need on the job. It depends. Okay, some of these questions are really long. Didn't you have a question, Frank?
I think that, yeah, so work for some cool then, how important is it for Java developers to know about cloud?
Right. Okay. How important is it for a Java developer to know about cloud? I want to say it's not important because I don't know anything about cloud. One of the reasons I wanted to move on to a slightly different role from the one at JetBrains is because doing developer advocacy for a tool which is on your computer, which is like local based, meant that I had very few opportunities to learn how real developers use in the cloud. And because I left real development about 10 years ago, I hadn't used it in my actual experience. So I guess my answer to your question is it's pretty important to understand about cloud, because I decided I'd come to a point where I just need to understand a lot more about what real developers are doing, how they're really deploying stuff to production and in their CI environments, and basically how cloud plays into what real developers are doing these days. And to follow up from that, which I think probably relates to some of the questions on here, like how do you learn new stuff? In my case, cloud. I wasn't going to go and read about cloud while I was doing my other job at JetBrains, and I wasn't going to play around with cloud if I didn't need it on my day job, because I do not have that sort of time, and I'm not that interested in investing time and energy into something that is not mandatory for me earning money. So what I was looking for in my next job was something which allows me to use the skills I already have, so I can bring something useful, but also gives me the opportunities to learn stuff on the job in terms of things like cloud, perhaps. So yeah, twofold. One, I guess cloud's pretty important. And two, if you need to learn something new, you don't necessarily have to invest your own time into learning it, although you can if you want to. You might want to pivot your job towards something which allows you to learn something new if you want to.
The basis of my question is that you're a lot about full stack development.
Right.
And
I don't know what that means.
yes,
I don't know what that means, because I've always considered myself a full stack developer, because I started off as a web developer, hence my answer about JavaScript. So I did a bunch of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and I already had some Java experience. So I ended up also doing backend stuff in Java, which I think is a full stack developer. No, it's end to end. So I don't really know what these words mean, because like one year it means one thing and another year it means a different thing. So I do have a whole talk on becoming a fully buzzword compliant developer. And that's basically like how to pick the technologies you're going to learn and how to learn about those technologies and how to sort of stay ahead of the curve as much as you want to, because that's the trick, right? It's super overwhelming to hear about, you know, if you are perhaps looking for the next role and you're seeing things like full stack developer and you're like, I don't know what that means, and you're seeing cloud and you're seeing DevOps, and DevOps has been around for a while, you know, whatever words, Web3, right? Any of those things, and you're like, oh my God, I don't know any of this stuff and I'm becoming obsolete. And the answer is we're like, well, the answer is we're constantly obsolete. So like, who cares? It's fine. Just go with whatever your strengths are and pick up bits and pieces as they interest you, in my opinion. Yes.
About something. Do you think that new features like real-world threads from Java 19?
Yeah.
Will they be really popular in community?
Right.
Because switch expressions, they really interesting, but I didn't see a lot of code, well, production code with switch expressions.
Right.
What do you think about real-world threads? And the question, will developers use the real-world threads in the right way? Because they are absolutely correct if you try to do really heavy calculation with these threads.
Right. So the question is, will virtual threads be popular with developers? Came in Java 19, we think. Yeah, I don't know what year it is, let alone what version of Java we're on. My personal opinion on that area, bearing in mind I have only skimmed the surface of that stuff, is that it feels like the sort of thing that your library and framework developers need to be on top of, and they need to be using virtual threads in the stuff that you're using, but you as a developer, certainly 90% of normal everyday developers should not be touching that stuff. Like it's just too easy to get wrong. Same as threads. Like when I wrote the stuff in here about threads, I was a bit like, please don't use threads. It's just like, yes, it's how we do parallel stuff. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that was what I said here, is like, you have frameworks to do parallelization and concurrency. Like don't use the raw low level stuff unless you really know what you're doing. I'm sure people will use it, but I think that it's much more interesting for those who are writing frameworks and the stuff that we're going to be using, rather than us doing it in our everyday code. Yes.
Question from the internet, but here it's going up to rerun a longer question. Here we are sitting in New York City. Which type of pizza is better, Chicago or New York?
Which types of pizza better, Chicago or New York? I have to say New York, I'm afraid. It's not just because I'm here. I do like a nice thick deep pan every now and again, but like, no, New York pizza. You have to fold it in half and put it in your mouth. Right, I'm going to try a longer question. Oh, I like this one. Oh, it's really long. Today, loads of companies rely heavily on live coding interviews where one needs to code solutions that are extremely rare, like the implementation of stack, hash map. All right, nobody is doing these things today. I'm sure this is plainly a bad approach, as the focus should be rather on problem-solving skills and logical thinking. As I have a huge problem with this type of task in front of a live audience with time pressure, how to prepare myself for these terrible practices? Is there a way to avoid them? When are companies going to figure out this sort of testing is plain nonsense? Well, that's like 13 questions, but yes, I agree with all of that. In fact, the piece I wrote in here was something along the lines of, I can't remember what it's called now because I wrote it like 2 years ago, but it's something around learning how to pass a technical interview is a skill in its own right. It is not related to your skills in the job at all. It doesn't mean it's pointless, because you need to pass a stupid technical interview to get your stupid job. So it is what it is. Yes, it is a skill in its own right. Some of these books, like Head First Java and certification books and things like that, are a good way to get the correct answers to some of the sorts of questions you're going to see in the interviews. The interviews are a bit dumb and stupid, and doing stuff on a whiteboard is a bit of a nightmare. Interestingly, I got my job at LMAX because we were doing whiteboard interview questions, and I was asked something about hash map implementations by Martin Thompson, and I was like, I don't really know why the hash has to be unique. Like, what is that about? And then he spent 10 minutes explaining to me how hashing functions worked and why it needed to be unique. And that was great. And that made me want that job straight away, because what I did is I was just honest, and I was like, I don't know this. And what he did is took that opportunity to educate me. And I saw not only did he know what he was talking about, but that he really cared that I could be brought up to speed to work effectively in the team. So interviews are a two-way process. You are completely allowed to interview the interviewer. And if, as has happened at some other places I've interviewed for, including very large companies who I shan't name, if the interviewer can't answer your questions about the piece of work that you're trying to do because they don't understand it either, then it's a huge red flag. And just don't, if you have the choice. I recognize not everyone has that choice when they're going for a job. So sometimes, especially when you're junior, you just have to suck it, and you have to understand. Like when I was interviewing in London, a lot of what I did was learning the rote answers to standard Java concurrency questions, because they came up again and again and again. Yeah.
There's a good book called Grokking Algorithms.
That's right. Yes.
That's best book if you're not into, if you don't know these algorithms by heart. It explains how to do that stuff. It's good for interview prep for sure. Yeah,
there's a book called Grokking Algorithms, and it's a good way to prep. The other one I actually found that I used to use a lot is Head First Design Patterns. Because you can skim that pretty quickly, because someone will always ask you, explain to me a design pattern that isn't singleton, and you're like, okay, fine. So just pick one from the book and learn it and figure out how to answer those questions. That was it. Yes.
That you would want to share about what you think would be more effective ways of assessing skills for interview situations?
Yeah, I have loads of opinions. The question is, do I have opinions on how to improve the interview process? I do not. I don't know how to make them all that workable, and that's why things haven't changed that much. But I was watching. Has anyone seen this program, The Bear? about like a chef in Chicago, right? And there's a thing in that where like as part of the job interview is to work for a day in the kitchen, like doing the job you're supposed to do. And I'm like, well, of course, duh, like it's obvious. But you could just as easily do the same thing when you're coding. Instead of doing a whiteboard, just do a pair programming exercise. And it doesn't have to be particularly complicated. It can just, I've done a couple of pair programming exercises in London, and they can be dumb things like code a square or whatever. But just getting a view of how someone, can they pair, can they ask questions? Do they know how to use their IDE? You know, that kind of thing. And it just gives you a feel for whether you can work with this person. Now, I think one of the traps we've fallen into in this industry is thinking there's right ways and wrong ways, and there's good and there's bad. When in actual fact, interviewing is much more like dating. It's like, okay, you are this kind of person, this kind of developer with these sorts of skills, and you like to work this particular way. And we are this kind of company, and we do this kind of thing, and we have people who work in this particular way. Is this a fit which works, or does it not work? Okay, particularly when it comes to juniors, because juniors don't know anything. You know, of course they don't know anything. And that's fine. But like, you're still going to need juniors, and you're still going to need to train them up. So giving them stupid whiteboard questions is not going to weed out the terrible juniors from the good juniors. I mean, nobody knows anything. So get them on board, see if they can work with you, see if they can ask you the right questions, see if they respond to the way that you work, and think of it more like dating, if that helps. Yes.
You confessed to a lot of things that you don't know during this question answer period.
Right.
I'm wondering, do you ever suffer from imposter syndrome? And if not, what techniques can you offer for not suffering?
Do I suffer from imposter syndrome? I have asked myself that a lot. I'm sure I did when I probably had anywhere up to 10 years experience, like, you know, a good chunk of experience. Especially because if you code on your own, you don't do pair programming, you don't do mob programming, you spend a lot of time just going, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. One of the things about being a developer advocate, and also having worked at LMAX and doing pair programming for 4 years, is that you just get a much better feel for like who you are and like what you're good at and what you're not good at. And as a developer advocate, you have to be able to stand up on stage and go, oh, my demo doesn't work, it's all fallen over in a heap, you know, and just accept the fact that, you know, you don't know everything, and things go wrong all the time. And more often than not, the people around you in an audience like this are very supportive, because they're like, oh my God, that's happened to me as well. You know, very few people go, what an idiot, you know. And if they do, you don't want to be friends with that person. So yeah, I mean, for me, the way that I overcame any imposter syndrome or lack of confidence is, and this applied when I kind of moved into developer advocacy, is having an understanding of what I know, what I don't know, what I'm good at, and what I like, and what I don't want to do. And for me, that meant coming up with sort of my brand, which is like, I'm an ordinary developer. I've worked at a lot of different jobs, but I've always considered myself to be a decent, smart developer, but not like a really amazing developer. And all I want to do as a developer advocate is reach out to other people who are decent, smart developers who want to get a little bit better, and just say, here's some tips, like the structural search and replace. Here's some stuff which is cool. You might like it, you might not. And if you don't like it, it doesn't make me a terrible person. It's just not your thing. It's fine. Right. There was an interesting question here about, there are more people in the room who can answer this than me, but what is the role and importance of Java champions in big tech firms such as Google, Meta, Microsoft, plus more? Do we have any Java champions working in such companies on any complex projects over there who can share insights? There are Java champions working for Google, definitely. James Ward, and that's like 4 or 5. Huh? Right, all those names. Right. And Martin is working at Microsoft, and Kirk is at Microsoft. Huh? Mark Heck. Oh, he's in Microsoft, isn't he? Bruno, yeah. God, all these people at Microsoft, which never used to be a Java house. And so part of this was like, are there basically they're working on complex projects who can share insights. I think what's kind of interesting to me about that is that the Java champions working in Google, for example, are not doing the same things as the Java champions working at Microsoft, for example. Microsoft specifically, I think, I mean, I can't speak for Microsoft, but, you know, not well known for having a Java presence and not well known for having their Java thing. What the Java champions do there is much more about like bringing awareness inside the company of Java and the community, and also bringing the Microsoft out into the Java community. Whereas at Google, it's like a totally different thing, because Google has used Java, does use it all over the place, uses Kotlin, has Android. There's probably some lawsuit going on there somewhere. You know, so they have the Java champions working there are doing different types of things, have different types of challenges. And it also, one of the other interesting things is that some of the Java champions working at those companies became Java champions by doing the work they do inside those large companies. But following up to another part, this question has about 16 different parts to it as well. But there are other types of Java champions who, once they became a Java champion, then got hired into some of these companies to do Java championing type stuff. So, for example, this says, are Java champions interviewed like any other engineer with leaked code rounds, system design, or treated differently? Are you nodding because they are interviewed like that, or yeah? My experience is quite different. But I would like to caveat that actually. Now I have 20 years industry experience, and now I have 10 years experience as a developer advocate, and I have a public portfolio out there. You don't interview the same way at all, because no one's asked me to do any coding exercises when I was with my new job I've just got. The interview rounds I did for all the different companies there, not one of them asked me to write a single line of code, because I've done it all. It's on YouTube, it's on conferences, it's, you know, I live code in front of people. There's no need to do that. So in answer to one of the questions of how to get out of doing whiteboard interviews is just do live coding at conferences. It's much easier. It's totally a good way to get around that problem. I'm sorry, there was one back there, sorry.
All right, I have to ask.
I'm going to pretend that I don't work for Gradle right now. And I always preferred Gradle. I always liked you best. But if you look at my GitHub repository, I tend to use 50-50, because developers use both. It's important to understand both. And really, at the end of the day, they both do the same thing. Do they both do the same thing? Probably. I'm allowed to say that because I don't work for Gradle, the build tool, and I'm working on the Gradle Enterprise stuff. So, and Gradle Enterprise supports Maven. So they're both fine. We can live together in harmony. It's all right. We don't have to be all like, you know, Eclipse versus IntelliJ IDEA. There was a question here. Do you think big companies, they don't believe that we can code? Do I think that big companies don't believe that we can code? No, I think it's more interesting than that, actually. I have another talk I give about this. Actually, I'm giving career advice for programmers on the O'Reilly live stream in a couple of months. The problem is not that companies don't believe that we can code. The problem is that we have no idea how to measure how good a programmer is. And so companies will just come up with these arbitrary things to sort of figure out whether this is a good developer or this is a good developer. But none of that stuff works. I mean, when Google was doing all of their tricksy interview questions they used to do, like, yeah, they did their study and found that it had absolutely no bearing on the competence of the developer. And they did the same studies back in the 60s. And like all the studies just prove that our ways of measuring how good a developer is are all completely wrong. And so that's the thing. It's like they have to do something to create some sort of barrier to entry. And just without GitHub. Yeah, I mean, when I was doing, I'm going to say doing recruitment for LMAX, I wasn't the recruiter, but I was like the next line down. When I was looking at developers' resumes and CVs for LMAX, if they had a GitHub thing on there, or if they'd written a book or had a blog, I would always look at that. And sorry? Did they check this? Yeah. But a developer would, not a recruitment person necessarily. Well, I don't know, maybe. But if you've got a GitHub profile which is kind of like empty and full of kind of crappy projects, that doesn't count against you because everyone's got one of those. But if you've got one which is good and fully fleshed, and if you've got like automated tests in your GitHub projects, you get an extra tick and you go straight through to the interview phase. in my opinion. Again, it's about who fits, because in when I was recruiting for LMAX, we wrote a lot of automated tests and did a lot of test-driven development. So for us, having tests was a huge plus. But for other organizations, they're like test schmests. Who cares about tests, right? Okay. Yes.
Fraction of IntelliJ keyboard shortcuts do you really have memorized?
Ooh, what fraction of IntelliJ keyboard shortcuts do I have memorized? I don't know how many there are. I can tell you that on the quick list of keyboard shortcuts that you can usually print out, that I know all of them. But not because I went through and memorized them all. It's just I had what's it called? Key promoter plugin turned on. And I just got so annoyed with it flashing up the stupid keyboard shortcut that I just had to learn all the keyboard shortcuts. All right, I think that's it now.
Before everyone leaves, and I know you won't, there's books to give away, you will just take care of. First of all, thank you to Trisha and Pratik, who's here somewhere. There you are. Yeah. Super convenient. One of the questions is, what is a Java champion? Because there are a lot of them in this room. Raise your hand if you're a Java champion. Your hand is up, come up to the front. We're going to take things. Yeah.